Hello! So last week I made a video about our spring nature corner and it was full of flower children and it was quite well received, so I thought you might like to know how to make one. So in this video we'll make this one together, but you can make the flower children in all colors and you can play around with different leaf shapes and with different caps. You can add some stuff to it. I'll show you how to do that, and don't worry, it's really easy and it's quite quick actually. So you can make a lot of them for all the kids and all the grannies in your lives. Now let's get to it. So let's see what we'll need for our flower children. Of course we'll need some kind of felt. I prefer the wool felt because it's much sturdier and it doesn't fray at all. The normal synthetic felt likes to get stretched on the edges and this one stays nice and firm. But this can be done with synthetic or wool felt, whatever you have. It's also an ideal project to use some little leftover scraps. I always keep those even if they're really small, like this. So use your scraps, there are a lot of small parts here. We'll need some scissors to cut the felt and of course something to sew. Just a needle and some thread. I like to choose color matching thread so it doesn't show much. Now to fill our doll we need some kind of either wool rowing or synthetic polyester fiber fill or something that the dolls can be filled with. If you don't have any of this, cotton wool would also work. Now one last thing, for the little head you can use either stockinette or stocking. This is a real stocking, or this tubular thing that goes onto your finger if you cut yourself. You can get it in some of the apothecaries. Or my favorite, you can use t-shirts, either beige or they can be white, and you can tie-dye them in some tea. Of course you can also use a normal stockinette or nylon stockings. All of this works. Use what you have, whatever it is, just you want a little bit of stretch on your material and that's it. I keep all of this in one bag so it's easier to find, and I just take it out and find an appropriate color so I don't need to rummage over, and I have everything for the doll's head and doll's bodies in this little baggie and I can choose. That's all there is to it. Now let's get going. Now I've got all my materials laid out and I've cut out my patterns. You don't really need a pattern, but it can be sometimes easier to work with one. And my dolls are inspired by this book all year round. So first let's make a head. I just took a piece of an old t-shirt. It should be just some kind of stretchy fabric, doesn't matter which kind. You can make yourself a template or just take a ruler and draw it on. For me, because I do it more often, I'll make more of this. I just made myself a template. It's easier and quicker, but there's nothing wrong if you don't want to have one. This is just a piece. It doesn't need to be perfect square. It could be a circle, in fact, and it would work just the same. So don't worry about that. And we will take a piece of this filling, put it in the middle and crumple it up like this, and I'll tie it off here. This head should be about the size of a marble. I like to take double thread so that it's a bit stronger. I'll put some out because it was a little bit big, and now I'll come closer and I take the corners and I bunch everything up. I try to make as nice round head as possible, and I'm holding this with one finger and then with the other arm I'm just twisting it around a couple of times, and now I can knot it. If you're worried about untangling, you can knot it again on the other side. There's no harm in one knot too much. There can be some in one knot not enough. And now we can just tidy this off. You don't need to do this. And here's our head. Now to make a body, cut out a piece from felt that is 8 by 4 centimeters or a good 3 inches to 1.5 inches. I made a template so that you can see the measurements, and also it's very practical to have a template so that you can see which of your scraps are big enough, if there are any. If your template is made from card, you can get away just cutting next to it, especially if you're used to it already. But if this is difficult for you, then you can just draw it out first or measure it with the ruler and mark it with a pencil. This will be our body. Mine is a bit crooked here, but that's actually quite okay because I will make it into a cylinder and then we'll gather it at the top. Make a knot. This is just a normal French knot. If you don't know any of these tricks of sewing, let me know and I'll explain more later. I start from the bottom and then I butt these two edges together nicely. I come out at the bottom and now I go in from the other side, from the side where I came out. I hope it's visible. And I try to keep the same distance from the edge on both sides. And now I'll try to keep the same distance between the seams so that it looks nicer. But to tell you the truth, that's just my OCD kicking in, because I don't think that people who play with these dolls ever notice how something is crooked. They just enjoy them. The little people in our lives. Watch out that you don't sew this part. We just want to make a cylinder. And as you can see, I was not very meticulous when I was cutting, so these two edges don't align. But that's not a problem at all, because we can just fix it very easily. When I come to the end, I'll make another knot on the inside. I'll show you how to do that. For this, I take the thread close to what I'm sewing and I just wind it onto my needle a few times and then I let it slide off. I watch that it doesn't untangle first and I push the knot just to the brim if possible. And as I said, I'm gonna just cut this part so that it's flush. Once all this is done, we'll make a running stitch over. I knotted it here, but I will not cut it off because I will need it for the running stitch. Running stitch is that first stitch that you have ever done in kindergarten or with your mom or whoever taught you how to sew. Granny, I don't know. And the nice thing about these gathering stitches, they don't need to be very nice and small. They just need to be all around the top edge. And sometimes the thread tangles, don't worry. I like to end just beside my start. As you can see, not on the other side. I like to end here because it will look better, I think. Now we'll take our head, push it in and pull this together. Pull tightly. That's why it's better to have double thread. And you can use your thumb to put inside so that you can fixate this part of the head. That's why we left it there. And now I can again go a few times across and I like to go through and sew it on as well. Since it snapped off, I will tie it off like this. If it didn't, I could use the same knot as I did before. But this is how you can manage if you have some cheap thread that you got who knows where from who knows whom and you just don't want to throw them away. That's one solution. I'll push the threads to the inside and then I'll cut them off. We've got our body At the end we will probably fill it a little bit. You can do that now if you want to, but sometimes it's easier to work on the hollow body. Now on to the leaves and the head. For the leaves we'll need a piece of felt in form of these leaves. The easiest way to do is to just cut a rectangle, and then you can either take a template, draw it on, or you can just freehand cut these leaves. They're easy to cut. Pay attention so that this part is about the same with every leaf. For me it's easy because it's about as long as I make as this part of the blade that I'm using. Now once I've got all of my leaves cut, as you can see that wasn't very hard, we will gather it at the top and wrap it around the body. I'll use a thread that matches this felt because I don't want it to show. If you have felt that looks nicer on one side than the other, make sure to check out and choose the nicer side for the outside. And now I make the same gathering stitch on this leaf part. You can make several stitches at once. Make sure to end on the inside. Now that we've got this sewn, we will just position it in a way that this part will wrap around and that the back part will come together at the back, so that, you know, these two seams will be together. And I just pull together tightly. I double check that it's in the right place, and now I can fix it with some seams and of course with a knot in the end. If you want to make it more sturdy, you can again sew it onto the dress and onto the head with a couple of stitches like this. It's not entirely necessary, that depends who will play with this. If this is just for a display in some old granny's home, that will not be a problem, but if little kids will play with it, then I definitely recommend putting in a few stitches. You will not regret it, because then you don't have to fix it later on. If you're making it for some kindergarten or for your grandkids or for people who are not adults yet, I think that's a better choice. Now my kids are older, so they would probably not be that vigorous with them, but you never know. And who knows, maybe some grandkids will someday play with this, or some other kids. We like kids in our house, so they come. And of course now I pull the threads in so that we can't see them. At the end, just brush the dress nicely, and as you can see, you can't even see where the two parts meet if you're a bit careful with this. Now all that is left is the head. For the head we will need about 5 by 2.5 centimeters or 2 by 1 inch big scrap of felt, and I'm sure I can find one that is big enough here. As I said, that's why the templates are useful sometimes. I will just cut these pieces off and I will just rough it out. Now, if you happen to possess these shared scissors for fabric or something that would cut it, you can use these. However, if you don't have that, you can always make one with just scissors, and I actually prefer this because it cuts deeper. Now, as you can see, what I did with my petal, the last petal is cut in half, and first half is here and the second half is here. That's not a coincidence. I did that deliberately because the whole head will look nicer and sturdier. This head will sit like this, and we will make it in the same way that we made this dress part, except we will put a little circle of this green felt in it. It doesn't need to be round. We will just scrump it up like this. At first, I will again align these two and sew it into a cylinder. I'll start from this side because I don't want to have a knot showing off at the tip of my flower. Again, I use this overcast stitch. This is a small cylinder, that's why I'm not sewing like before. I'm just butt heading and I will adjust it later on. Now I went back on the inside, I hope you can see, because I don't want to have a knot showing out at the tip of the hat. And I come up here. I'll make a knot because I don't want my running stitch to ruin this one. So I always knot it. And now we can continue with our running stitch the same way that we did our dress. As we put the head into our dress, now we will do the same with this small scrap of felt. Because we all know that snowdrops have this little green part or at the start of their flower. This can be a little bit fiddly, but you will manage. And I saw this one was too small, that's why I'll take a little bit bigger part, insert it in, hold on tightly and fix with a few seams, especially if the little ones will play with it. I always sew my dolls like they are going into the Third World War or something like that. So you probably don't need to be like, but for those little dolls, the playing of little children can feel pretty much similar, I guess. If you've seen the Toy Story, you know what I mean. I'll come out on the inside again, but I won't tie it off. I will leave the thread hanging because I want to sew it onto the head. And I'll just position it onto the head again so that this back seam, hope you can see, is on the same side as this back seam. And now I just fix it onto the head with a few small stitches. They won't be visible or noticeable if they're really small, don't worry. But I prefer that to gluing it on because glue sometimes can be less strong and little kids can be quite strong for this, so I prefer to sew it on. But of course, if you don't like this sewing part, you can always glue it on. Now I will knot it off on the head. Again, just simple French knot. I'll pull my threads in, put it off. This is our little flower child. Now go and make a few more in different colors. They don't need all to be snowdrops. You can use different kind of leaves. You can make leaves that are ragged at the edges, like primrose leaves, like this one is made from that. Or you can make another one with the same pattern, just a bit wider petals at the top, and this one is crocus and it also has these little stamens at the top. And you could also make the leaves in different shapes and different colors. Now we've made our flower child and it's time to add them to our nature corner and make many more for all the kids in your life or for all the ladies or maybe men who like the flower children. Usually it's all the ladies or younger kids, but you never know, times they are changing. So make some for your whoever likes them. And in the meantime, like and subscribe. I'm sorry this video was a bit jumpy and not filmed the best, but I'm learning, so stay tuned if you want to see my progress. See you next week. Bye bye!